Good morning. This is Jenna Iole for Abolition News Network, April 2nd, 1855. Today we have a man who at the age of 3 was a fugitive slave, who then became a pastor in a white congregation, a resident of Canada, then Great Britain, with some interesting stories to tell. Welcome, Samuel Ringgold Ward.
Thank you.
Good morning. First, tell us when you escaped to New York, how did you find the white people toward the slaves?
Well, first I was born in 1817, and my family fled to New Jersey in 1820. And by 1826, we were in New York. Your question is one of complication because I was at the African Free School, which was established by two of our founding fathers, John Jay and Alexander Hamilton, both white. So there were pockets of abolitionists and whites doing great things in New York. But it wasn't until I returned from Geneva that I saw the foolishness and the wickedness, the invincibility of the African Negro hate in America than anywhere else.
Did you find any passages in the Bible that were significant or that you saw that applied to you or other black people?
Well, yeah, Miss Olay, suppose that blacks treated your family as Americans treated mine for 3 or 5 generations of bondage. If we look at Proverbs, I got to start that over, sorry. Well, yes, Miss Olay, suppose that blacks treated your family as Americans treated mine for 5 generations of bondage. It's as if Psalms 109, verses 5 through 21 inclusive, were written right for that purpose. Actually, let me read a little bit of that, if you don't mind. Thank you. It says at 5, "They return evil for good and hatred for my love. Arrange for evil persons to turn on him, send the accuser to bring him to trial. When his case is called for judgment, let him be pronounced guilty. Count his prayers as sin. Let his years be few." You see, everyone will be judged.
Wow, that's intense. I also want to ask you from your personal experience, growing up in the free part of the U.S., what advice would you give to other Negro men growing up in the 1850s?
Well, 3 pieces of advice. 1, find your appropriate place of duty. 2, once you establish that, keep it. And 3, if you ever stray from it, get back to it as speedily as possible. For example, if you're a blacksmith and you shoe a horse, shoe that horse to perfection that no one can perfect upon it. If you are a farmer and you plow your field, plow that furrow so that it's to perfection's point. If you're an interviewer, make it so your interviewee and guest never want to leave.
That's really good advice. Now, by the time that you left Canada in October 1851, what had you learned about the U.S. churches toward your people?
Well, that was a bad time actually to ask that question because the Fugitive Slave Act went into play in 1850 in September. So, well, that's a bad time to answer that question because the Fugitive Slave Law went into act in September of 1850. The government was kneeling to the 62,000 slave owners and the riches that those slave commodities had brought them. There were some churches that had moved to that societal view and away from biblical doctrine, a few that didn't, like the Congregational Church of Butler. They ordained me in 1853, and Antoinette Brown, the first American woman to be ordained, was at Butler. Now, other churches, Bishop Richard Allen, he established the African Methodist Episcopal Church.
Oh yes, we actually interviewed him here the other day at A&N. Let's turn to God and religion. Do you see any ray of light on the horizon?
Well, Great Britain freed their slaves. France, Brazil, they eradicated slavery. It just seems that America is holding on to slavery. And the abolitionists are doing great work, and they're working in God's favor.
Good. You were finally getting a little bit more positive. Was there anything else?
Well, I find it remarkable that abolitionists in England and in America, they both are very similar in status and in character. And it is as if they're called to help the needy and the poor in God's grace and His image.
That's Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image, one man and woman.
I must say and conclude that it is his cause.
As a final question, I hear you were involved in some anti-slavery activities with the British and churches in Canada. Can you tell us something about that briefly?
Oh, Canada. Canada is a great refuge because they didn't abide by the Fugitive Slave Act, which was from America, of course. So when I wrote my book, which is here, the autobiography of the fugitive Negro, the proceeds for this book went toward the Anti-Slavery Society of Canada. And I would say, as I'm sure Canada is proud, that we saved hundreds of slaves.
Wow, what a career. Well, thank you, Samuel Reverend Ward.
Would you mind if I read out of this?
Oh, go right ahead.
Oh, okay, hold on. Just an excerpt. What I rejoice to know is that God, in his infinite mercy, has been pleased to grant to his people here the power and the privilege of seeing the evils that are around them, and of holding and wielding the spiritual weapons, which, being mighty through God, fully enable them to demolish the strongholds of Satan. I know of no brighter, more hopeful evidence of God's gracious favor to his modern Israel. More than any earnest, simple love of the gospel, than it's been sought out, preached, believed, felt, and honored by all departments and branches of the British Church.
Thank you, Reverend Ward. I think we'll end on that high note. This is Jenna Iole for Abolition News Network saying good morning.